Quality, comfort, and grip at an affordable price. Whether it's our standard, pro, or elite socks, there's an option for everyone. Try a pair for yourself now at puregripsocks.com.
They've been around for a while, so you've probably heard of them, and you've definitely seen one of their springy shoe flick videos on Instagram. But are they really as amazing as they seem, or just super hyped up by way of some clever marketing? Well, when you're talking about a football boot specific application, I actually think they're really, really good. However, I also think there's some people that would try these and absolutely despise the way that they feel. Which is why I think the best way to review these in the context of football boots is by way of pros and cons. And really quickly before we keep going, if you enjoy reviews on more unique products outside of football boots like this, don't forget to drop a like on the video. And if you appreciate the unsponsored, brutally honest opinions on this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots and products of 2025. So what exactly are VKTRY insoles? To put it as simply as possible, it's an insole that you can put in effectively any form of footwear, but with a full-length carbon fiber plate designed to spring back into shape when force is applied, which will naturally happen when you bend your foot for running, sprinting, jumping, landing. You get the idea. And the tech is legit, especially in the world of football boots. We see so much new technology that when you actually get the boots on your feet, you can actually feel. In the case of VKTRY insoles though, this carbon plate is undeniable and super noticeable. It will change the feel of your football boots entirely. Whether or not that change will be good or bad though is very much going to depend on your personal preferences. Where before we get into the pros and cons, I want to share some performance stats that VKTRY shares on their website about their insoles, where I'm sure there is some validity to how they came to these conclusions as far as performance gain stats, but as with any performance gains promises, I do think they need to be taken with a grain of salt. According to VKTRY, with these insoles, you'll be able to jump up to 1.6 inches or 4 centimeters higher. You'll run a 40-yard dash 0.12 seconds quicker. You'll be 9.3% more explosive, along with also having softer landings. And you'll be 41% less susceptible to foot injuries and 22% less susceptible to leg injuries, which all sounds amazing, and the insoles do feel great, but there is a catch, and that's the price tag, where for a football boot application, you go through their website, give them a little bit of information, and it will spit out the right insoles for you, but they're going to be the VKTRY Gold insoles that have a retail price of $149 US, which is more expensive than a lot of mid-level football boots and more than half the price of most top-end ones. Where granted, if you sign up for their mailing list, you can get at least 10% off, so there are some savings to be had, but long story short, they're very expensive insoles, so the question now becomes, are they worth it? With the first pro being that they definitely work as advertised in terms of adding stiffness to your football boot. So if you wear a football boot that you wish had a more speed boot-esque responsive sole plate, simply putting these insoles inside of your football boots will immediately change the feel underfoot. With the Copa Pure 3 Elite, I think being a great example of a football boot that might benefit from VKTRY insoles if you wanted a more responsive feel, in that this sole plate is very flexible. Not necessarily a bad thing. I quite like the way that it feels, but if you liked the fit and upper of this boot but wish it had a little bit more of that speed boot responsiveness, throw the VKTRY insoles in, and you now have a sole plate that springs back as hard as any top-end speed boot. With a major con to the added stiffness provided by these insoles being that if your boots already have a stiff sole plate, this might make them too stiff. For example, the F50 Plus already has a double sole plate construction, making it one of the stiffest forefoots in a football boot currently on the market. Throw the VKTRY insoles in there to add another layer of stiffness, and the foot of this football boot no longer bends. Where if you want to feel that responsiveness, the sole of the football boot has to be able to flex. Another pro, and I think this should be expected given the cost of the product, is the overall quality. These are very well made and feel like they're going to last a long time. The lining material, the foam they've used, the carbon plate, even this little bit of a grippy texture they have in the forefoot to prevent the sole from moving around inside of your football boots, all feel extremely well made, and there is no sense that this is going to break whatsoever. Like I said, it's a company that's been around for quite a few years now. If there were issues with durability and quality, you probably would have heard of it. Another potential con of the VKTRY insoles that has a lot to do with how your football boots are going to feel is how much they weigh compared to a standard stock football boot insole, which granted is usually just a super thin piece of foam, but it does play a role in how light the boots are, where when you're talking about a pair of high-end speed boots, for example, you're paying a premium for them to shave away 10, 20, maybe even 30 extra grams. Where if we take a look at these two insoles on a scale, both in the same size 9.5 US, the F50 insoles weigh in at 13 grams, whereas the VKTRY insoles weigh in at 47. That's over 3.5 times more than the stock insoles, and when you're talking about the total package of, as an example, the F50 Elite, you've now bumped the weight up to the same weight as the $90 version of the F50, even though this is the $260 model. Yes, you've made the sole plate feel more responsive, but you've taken away a lot of that lightness. Another pro would definitely be the durability of the VKTRY insoles, where, like I mentioned, the build quality is top-notch, especially when compared to what is usually a very cheap thin foam as a stock insole in any given pair of football boots, where, to make a long story short, expect these to last a very long time, and while it is an expensive initial investment, they are likely to outlast not just one pair of football boots, but several pairs, meaning that you'll only need this one insole for several seasons. When your boots break, pull them out and throw them in the new pair. Just to share a couple neutral points outside of the pros and cons, they do mention added support from the VKTRY insoles, and I will say there is a little bit of arch that has some structure to it because of that carbon plate, but in general, compared to other more, I'll say, support-focused insoles that I've tried, I wouldn't say that they are overly supportive in terms of how high the arch is. In other words, if your feet are on the flatter side, you'll be fine with these, but if you are buying them expecting to have tons of arch support, you might be a little disappointed. It's also very important to note that while the version that they recommend for football boots are super thin, they're still much thicker than the average football boot insole, meaning that they are going to take up a little bit more space and eliminate some volume that you would otherwise have with the stock insoles. Meaning that if your boots currently fit super tight, once you slide these in, they might be too tight, where on the opposite side, if your boots have a little bit of extra room that you could do without, having a slightly thicker insole like this will help to eliminate that space and could actually make your boots feel better. Again, it's one of those things that's very case specific. And then there's the potential of stud pressure relief, where this carbon plate, because of how stiff it is, can actually help to reduce the feeling of individual studs underneath your feet, usually caused after a little bit of time, once the sole plate of your football boots has kind of softened and is more or less starting to wear out. In that situation, I definitely think these very stiff insoles can make your boots feel more comfortable, but at the same time, if your football boots are wearing out, they're likely going to need replacing sooner rather than later, so do you just pay to replace the boots or buy $150 insoles? Again, the choice is yours. So in conclusion, my recommendation for VKTRY insoles is as follows. If you would prefer a more responsive feel from the sole plate of your football boots, effectively added stiffness, and you can justify the relatively high price tag, I definitely think that these do a phenomenal job of that. Where it's actually pretty cool that you can take a pair of football boots that does not have any responsiveness or spring back to the sole plate and make it feel as responsive as even the best speed boots. However, if you've never found a stiff underfoot feel to your football boots to be particularly comfortable, you probably won't be a huge fan of the way the VKTRY insoles feel. Are there genuine performance gains to be had? I'd argue it's a bit of a toss-up, but certainly if you want your football boots to feel more responsive, nothing does a better job of doing that than these right here.